Excellent. My name is Peggy McAvoy. I am the Assistant Superintendent for Operations here in the Seattle Public Schools, and welcome all of you to our second community meeting on capacity management. We are looking at our intermediate capacity plan, and we are here to make sure that we are understanding what each of the community is seeing as we present our plans and some of our issues, and to try and come up with some solutions that meets everybody's needs. Obviously, what we want to be able to do is educate all of our students in wonderful school facilities, and we have a wonderful problem right now, which is growing enrollment. We haven't had that for quite a number of years, but because of that, we need to start thinking about how do we allocate our resources, what do we do with our previously closed school buildings, how do we make sure that we maximize the wonderful educational experience that we have, and we need to be fiscally responsible. So we're trying to balance all of those pieces as we're looking at our planning phase. We are also between our what I call our BEX levies, and we'll talk more about the definitions here related to that. So what I have brought is a team that's going to walk you through the analysis of what our enrollment projections look like, what some of our potential solutions are, and we will tell you that they are draft, and we will be saying that multiple times. As a matter of fact, we just presented it to the school board last night, and some of the comments that they had for us were things like, can you reduce the portables? Have we looked at some of these options? And so we're taking that feedback. We'll be taking the feedback that you give us tonight, and we'll be re-looking at our plans because we really need this input in order to make the best plan possible. And with that, I want to make sure that I do some introductions. We have two of our school board directors here, Director Carr and Director Sundquist.
And I'm just, I think we're both basically here. Sherry, unfortunately, was ill yesterday and didn't get a chance to be at our work session, but I had a chance to see this material yesterday in work session form and massage it a little bit in terms of question and answer, and I think we're probably both here tonight to make sure that we're in touch with the community's reaction, hearing the kind of questions that are coming forward, and making sure that we are in a position to follow up and do as good a job with this in conjunction with staff as we possibly can.
And we consider this what we call the iterative process. We are going to take some feedback, we're going to work the problem, we're going to come back with some more options. We also are looking at community input, and we also have a capacity management advisory committee that we are starting up. Their first day of work will be October 18th. We will be having them look at some of the issues. And on that planning committee will include people who represent different regions, different what I call specialty concerns. So it might be, or specialty programs such as advanced learning, English language learners, option schools, special education, because we want their input. And this is going to be a standing committee that we can come back to over and over again. They'll be meeting quarterly. And we are looking still for people to join that committee. So if you're interested, our applications are open until the 14th of October. Then we will start our committee meetings. We will have multiple meetings as we get started because we want to make sure that we have time to have some deep discussions before we have to give some recommendations to the school board, because they will be looking at our first couple of years of our plan, making some recommendations, because there's some budget issues that we will need them to weigh in on, or lead us in, I guess is how I would say that. And that's happening later this fall. So with that, what I'd like to do is turn it over to the staff, who will walk you through what the process is and how we're hoping to give you the information, and then I'm getting your feedback. Tom?
So I can't talk like she talks. I have to use this. And I probably have to put it up this way. Welcome, everyone. Thanks very much for coming. I hope this is a very productive night for all of us. You have on your table index cards, pencils for you to write questions and comments during the course of the evening. And Dan will come around and pick up your index cards. If you'd just like to raise your hand, we'll watch for you. It's very important that we do have questions, and the format will be that we'll have, as you can see, a staff presentation for 40 minutes approximately. That's a PowerPoint presentation. Also, then the group question and answers for 40 minutes, and that's when we would read your index cards and then be able to follow up with a question if you had one thereafter. Finally, an important part of this would be the one-on-one discussions afterwards with any members of our team. Feel free to approach any of them, and I'll introduce them now. Over here to my right, Lucy Morello is the new Director of Capital Projects and Planning for Seattle Public Schools. Chris Richardson, Senior Facilities Planner. Chris is not only going to run the PowerPoint presentation, are we going to take notes then too on the screen? Great. And Ting-Yu Wang, our Facilities Analyst, big part of the team. Lucy and Doug, and finally I'm going to introduce Doug. Doug Nichols, our Interim Deputy Director of Capital Projects and Planning. Doug and Lucy are going to present the PowerPoint presentation. And at a point when Lucy approaches the screen to talk, there will be an opportunity to look at the different middle school service areas and some of the issues, options, possible solutions. And we're going to give you time to fill out the one form that you see a bunch of lines on, the horizontal lines, and you can fill in your comments, questions, feedback. The key to our success will be working with you throughout this whole process. So we hope you do that. Now the other handouts, as Peggy mentioned, the Facilities and Capacity Management Advisory Committee information, the deadline is October 12th. So that's Wednesday, October 12th, and you see an email address to send your interest in the committee. And I really think that's going to be an effective vehicle for us, an integral part of this whole process. We have the glossary, some of the definitions that we'll be talking about tonight, some of the topics, and certainly some that from time to time we use without always defining them, so you have that. And then on the back is some levy information that we're sharing with you. And of course you have your map, and you'll see on the map the different middle school service areas. So the white boxes denote the 9 middle schools, and those middle schools point to the areas in which they are related to their elementary schools. So, talked about the format, and I think it's important, since we have about 40 tonight, and that's great, thank you, is to continue to write your questions during the presentation so that we can sort them into categories. I hope we can read most of them. If not, we absolutely will answer your questions if you leave here without an answer. Now, I think an important thing for you in the future, tonight, tomorrow, in the ensuing days, at the bottom of the questionnaire form with all the lines, you'll see the email address capacity@seattleschools.org. If you send your comments, your feedback, your questions there, up will pop a link. Not only can you put your comments down, but up will pop a link showing all the presentation materials, including the PowerPoint presentation. So that's something that, just go to capacity@seattleschools.com, you'll get the link, and away you'll go with the presentation materials. So as you leave, if you would please leave your questionnaire form, but if you want to take the form home for notes and also to keep track of that email address, Please take one on your way out. We'll have extras. But it would really be great if you left your comments, at least in part, on this form. And of course, we'd like to keep your questions from your index cards too. That'd be very helpful. Ground rules. Well, actually 3. We just added one. The boss, Doug, said, please print clearly. He's not as young as he used to be, and particularly in this light. Now, we could turn the lights on, but then you wouldn't be able to see the screen because there's only one lighting section here, and it's all integrated. Sorry. Are we okay the way it is? Okay.
Will you bring the lights up after the PowerPoint?
We do, certainly.
Sure.
Yeah. If we want to go back into the PowerPoint, we can, but no problem. Please be respectful of all in attendance, and please raise your hand when you have an index card or two ready to be picked up so we can start sorting before the question and answer period. Without further ado, Doug Nichols.
Thank you, Tom. I think I will use the mic. I wanted to introduce Dan Egger, who got overlooked. He's on our planning team. Take a bow, Dan. I'm not actually sure where to stand for this presentation. The screen is so large. But I'll just stand over by you. Oh, that's fine. Thank you for coming tonight. The purpose of tonight's presentation is to look 4 years ahead in what we call the intermediate planning period. And so how did we come up with that term or that block of time? It's really that span of time between today and when any new construction that might help relieve capacity issues, any new construction would actually be ready for opening in the form of either a new school or the addition to a school. And in particular, that kind of new construction would probably be funded by a future levy that we would call BEX 4. And the vote on that levy is likely to be in the spring of 2013, which February of 2013, and therefore by the time you design and build and get a building open, it's sometime in 2015, 2016. So we have this intermediate period where we are having growth. We do need to find a way to accommodate that growth in the form of additional seats for students. And so that became our definition for intermediate term capacity management. Let's go to the next slide, Chris. Some of the context that may be obvious to all, but I'll go ahead and state them, that we find ourselves operating in as a planning team is 3 years of unprecedented or I guess unanticipated student growth. We've had about 2,500 additional students in the last 3 school years come our way. This is also the first time that as a district we have looked 5 years ahead or attempted to look 5 years ahead and do school by school enrollment projections. And as you probably know, there's a new student assignment plan in place which deals with student placement, student location, and that makes it even a little trickier, quite frankly, to predict where students are going to be 2, 3, 4, and 5 years out. That student assignment plan began in 2010, 2011, so the transition from the old open enrollment plan to the new plan is underway, and that transition period happens to coincide almost exactly with our intermediate term planning horizon. And the other thing is, of course, that we have an economy that's not quite as healthy as it was a couple of years ago, and that is influencing we think, student enrollment and student location through a couple of primary factors. We think one factor is that there's probably, the district is probably capturing some students that used to be enrolled in private schools. And the other thing is that there's a high likelihood that the mobility of families and students is less than it was when the economy was robust. Chris? So many of those factors contribute to a challenging time in which to make student enrollment projections. The first year of student assignment plan, the challenge of changing a mentality from a declining enrollment mentality to an increase in enrollment mentality is actually a significant challenge as well. But we're well into that changing mindset now and planning accordingly. The other factor that contributes to making enrollment projections by school challenging is that as programs grow and change and relocate from school to school or region to region, we need to be able to predict what the implications of those program activities are going to be on student enrollment. So this is kind of our world, this planning world that I've just described to you. So the data that we have, or that we are relying on for this intermediate term planning work is the student enrollment count as of the October of 2010, so almost a year ago now, a little over a year ago now. And those enrollment counts in 2010 were then projected ahead 5 years and allocated to individual schools in an attempt to give us baseline information from which we could begin to determine which schools are likely to be underutilized and overutilized. The October enrollment, or the head count for 2011 is just come in, just barely. And so in the near future, we will be able to have a new set of data that will update the planning basis they're working on right now, based on 2011 head count. And that will make our work even more accurate as we move forward. So the purpose of the plan is to identify projected overcrowding in the years 2012 through 16, propose some solutions or options, and you'll see that we've done that tonight, to accommodate that growth. We're putting our emphasis on the 2012-2014 portion of the plan, because the further out we look at our projections, the less accurate they are. And so our methodology here is to look to next year in particular with as much clarity as we can and make good, wise, conservative decisions for the next school year, and then revisit this plan annually so that we can update it and be looking essentially 1 year ahead at all times with pretty good accuracy. So even though it's a 4-year planning horizon, we're really going to act in 1 year increments. In doing so, we need to identify some critical dates for Lucy's team, who puts together plans and does construction on buildings. And so if she needs to open a school for next school year, she'll have to start working on design here just in a matter of weeks. And last, part of the purpose of this intermediate term plan is to make sure that we look out of the corner of our eye at the likelihood of a capital levy, a BEX 4 levy, in the spring of 2013, and make sure that our planning efforts respond to or respect some construction work that might come out of that levy, so that we don't duplicate efforts, or so that we don't have gaps between this intermediate term planning and this longer term planning called BEX 4. There's a couple of things that the plan does not address that we wanted to make sure we told you about. In terms of the permanent or stabilized location of the Accelerated Progress Program, APP, and Spectrum, those Lincoln currently houses the APP program and will do so next year. Beyond that, the location of the program is unspecified, and there is a special task force called the Advanced Learning Task Force that will be actively working on that over the next year. So what you won't see in our plan tonight is a permanent solution to that location issue. You'll also see when Lucy starts to talk about the growth projections for the middle school grades, that in the north end in particular, there's a pretty good growth anticipated. And even though she'll mention 2 or 3 possible school sites to mitigate that problem. We won't be making any recommendations for a permanent location of a middle school tonight. And then lastly, the many details associated with the student assignment plan and the transition of that plan really isn't the core of our presentation tonight. I wouldn't be surprised if there are questions relating to it. But our planning efforts, our role is to respond to the plan, not to create or implement the student assignment plan as a capital group. Okay, so as Tom mentioned, our planning work is organized geographically by middle school service areas that are depicted on the screen on this large map and on the maps in at your desk. And if you look closely at those maps when we get the lights on, you'll find that not only are existing schools identified, existing operating schools identified, but also any schools that are closed or leased are also there. So I think at this point every school building is on this map. Chris? The next 4 slides are a graphic representation of the degree to which various schools are utilized at the elementary level, the K-5 level. And so what you're looking at is a map of the district divided in its largest, by the largest grouping of lines, divided into middle school service areas. And then the light gray lines outline each of the elementary attendance areas. So, and the dots are the approximate locations of the elementary schools within that boundary. The color coding indicates the degree to which a school is utilized. So, a white elementary school zone is indicates an elementary school that is utilized less than 110% of its capacity. A yellow school is a school that's utilized between 110 and 120% of its capacity. Are the colors definable here? They're blurring together, aren't they? They are. The orange, if you can differentiate it, the next shade down, orange, is a school that is 120 to 140% utilized, and then the red zones are an elementary school that is 140% or more utilized. Now, let me point out that these utilization numbers include the portables that are currently on site. So if there's a school on this map that has 4 portables and it's indicated as 100% utilized, it means all the portables are full too. We've done this for each of the 4 planning years, 12, 13, 13, 14, and you can see progressively the increase in utilization in these areas. And of course the red ones are the supercritical ones, and then the orange, if this projector was rendering colors correctly, are the next most critical, and so forth. These maps indicate what would happen based on current enrollment projections if we did nothing. If we didn't open any schools, if we didn't add any portables, or if we didn't adjust any school boundaries, this would be the outcome. Of course, that's not our intent. Our job as planners and as a school district is to eliminate the red, reduce the orange, and reduce the yellow, and keep as many schools in the white zone as we can. So how do we do that? We have a couple of kinds of tools in our toolkit. We have one grouping called non-construction solutions, and those are things like adjusting boundaries for a particular school, adjusting what we call geo-zones for option schools, perhaps making grade configuration changes, program changes, or feeder patterns. All of those things are things that we don't do as a planning group, as a capital planning group, but we know how they work, and other members of the district are able to implement those changes. The construction solutions, which are the ones that we tend to focus on as a capital group, are composed of opening closed schools, opening leased schools, and using deploying portables. And so when we look at these options on how to solve problems, we try to run them through some sort of a filter to see which ones make sense. Any solution that we use needs to be coordinated with and respect the district's educational program. It needs to provide the number of seats at the right time and in the right location. We would like to use the low-cost and no-cost options first to conserve district resources, and whatever we use needs to be affordable within existing funds or anticipated funds from existing sources. And last, not only do the solutions need to complement any future levy, like a BEX 4 levy, but we made a rule that we didn't want any of our solutions, at least in this first round here, to rely on future funding that's not currently approved by the voters. I think a couple of people who spoke tonight before I did mention portables, and portables are kind of a tool in our life that they're handy to use and easy to deploy, but they have drawbacks. And but they are. You will see us recommending them in several sites tonight. The reason this slide is on the screen is that we weren't really sure how many portables the district had, so we determined that. We weren't really sure which sites could accept portables, which ones had constraints that would prevent portables from being used. So we went through a fairly thorough analysis of that and built a little database. So we now are able to quickly determine whether a particular site can take portables to either relieve crowding on that site or in a neighboring site. Okay, Lucy, I think I'm just going to turn it over to you at this point. Did I leave anything out, Tom?
No, but let me just like to take a quick break here. And does anyone have questions yet? Comment cards? Anything? Okay, good. I don't mean to push you, but it's a good time for. So just as a reminder, Lucy's going to stop after each slide so that you have an opportunity to kind of take a better look and think about it, and then write down any comments you'd like to on the questionnaire. And Director Mayer has arrived.
Thank you, Tom. Oh, is my mic working? Oh. Thank you, Tom. And if I forget to stop, remind me. I'm going to go through all 9 middle school service areas. And we're going to start off with Kurose, and I'm going to show you where that is on the big map. It's in the southeast area of Seattle. For the Kurose area, we have a capacity shortfall of a range of 325 to 400 students. The shortfall is at Graham Hill, ML King, Wing Luke, Rainier View, and Dunlap. To the left, we have potential options. We're going to be looking at non-construction options, adjusting programs and also adjusting boundaries. And then construction options. One of the construction options we have is to open old Van Asselt, the 1950s building. And even though we have a Van Asselt school at, I believe, AAA, this Van Asselt school would actually be renamed. So that would be an option that we would have in 2012. And then the other non-construction option is a number of portables over the 4 years. If you look to the right, the capacity impact, by opening Van Asselt, we would be providing an additional 150 seats for the Kurose service area, and also an addition of 200 seats by adding portables. With boundary adjustments, we would be moving the seats, positive or negative, depending on where it fell, with the boundary adjustment lines. So it wouldn't be adding, but just moving the seats from one boundary to another.
Okay, so could we go back to Aki for a minute? thanks. So if you have some thoughts you'd like to jot down, it also is an opportunity to write questions that we can.
Do you guys have the projected cost for opening that school?
Cost for opening the school is approximately 2.8 to 3 million.
For 150 students?
Well, we're going to go to the next slide, and I will show you there would actually be more students. Mercer service area would also pick up students for Van Asselt. So Van Asselt would be serving two service areas, Kurose and the Mercer service area. So moving on to the Mercer service area, we have a capacity shortfall of 500 to 600 students. We have the shortfall at Hawthorne, Van Asselt, Kimball, Maple, and Beacon Hill. As mentioned earlier, Van Asselt would serve both the Kurose service area and the Mercer service area, and a decision would be made to whether to make it either an attendance or an option school. In 2013, we would look at the option of opening Columbia, and again, we would make a decision on whether we would have it as an attendance area or an option school. With both schools, we would add an additional 634 seats for the Mercer service area. For Van Asselt, it probably seats about 425 students. So both the Kurose and Mercer service area, we would probably have 400 to 425 students at Van Asselt itself. The another non-construction solution is also to add portables over a number of years, and that would add additional seats in the Mercer service area of 150 seats. Washington service area, we have a shortfall of 0 to 100 students. At Gutzert, Muir, McGilver, Leschi, Stevens, and Montlake. As you can see, there's no construction solutions. We would be doing boundary adjustments and program changes. And as a note, as Doug had mentioned, APP would be located at Lincoln for the 2012-2013 year. Eckstein service area, we have a shortfall of 250 to 325 seats, and the shortfall is at Bryant, Olympic Hills, Olympic View, Rogers, and Wedgwood. The construction solution is to add a number of portables. It would add an additional seats of 275. Do we want to take a break for anybody to?
What we're going to try to do is hold the questions for the question and answer period, if at all possible. Sure appreciate that. But we'd like to pick up your comments and questions at any time.
Hamilton service area, we have an estimate shortfall of 50 to 100 students, and they're basically at the John Stanford International School, and we would do boundary adjustments, and we would add 2 portables at McDonald in 2015. Now keep in mind, this is 4 years out, so if our enrollment projections say differently, we may not need these portables further out here. We're really just focusing on the 2012, as Doug had mentioned, 2012 year. As we get the enrollment projections, then we can refine the options or solutions in further years out. Madison service area, 100 to 250 shortfall. Shortfall is at Lafayette, Gatewood, Schmidt Park. We're looking at opening Bowen, and we're looking at opening Bowen only as an interim site, as a bridge to Bex 4. What we'd like to do for the Madison and Denny service area is to look at at adding a couple of new elementary schools in the West Seattle area. Another option in 2013 to 2015 is we may look at the possibility of opening Hughes, or we may not. It just depends on the enrollment projections.
Let's stay.
Opening Bowen would give us an additional 1,285 seats. And in both the Madison and Denny area, as you'll see when I get to the next slide, we're not adding any portables as a construction solution. Again, Bowen would serve both the Denny and the Madison service area, and it would only be as an interim site. And again, for Hughes, only if needed, if the enrollment projections show that we need it, and depending on where and if we have a spike in the later years, whether we would open Hughes or not. McClure service.
I can pick them up.
McClure service area, 50 to 100 seat shortfall, and it's all at Hay. We'd add 2 portables at Hay and 2 portables at Queen Anne. Whitman service area, shortfall of 100 to 200 seats at Adams and Northgate. We would look at adding portables to Salmon Bay and further out at Northgate if needed. And this is a summary of all the different options. As you can see on the left, we have the service area and the range of the shortfall and possible solutions.
Sorry, was the solutions for Madison and Denny were the same? I think I missed the Denny slide.
Yes.
Okay.
And both service areas, we would not add any portables in the West Seattle area. Bowen would be an interim site to tie us over to BEX 4.
So I'd like to stay on this for a minute, and if we need to go back through the slides that Lucy's speaking of, let's do that now. Any requests to go back to any particular middle school service area?
Are the parentheses next to the school names, are those the capacity shortfalls by middle school zone?
Yes,
Okay.
middle school service area.
Yeah, thank you.
Are those figures adjusted by the current enrollment from September and October, or is that from previous projections, for example, that was at the workshop in June?
Those figures are from the October 2010 enrollment.
So,
And
Same from the June workshop.
because the June workshop shows a very different figure for the Madison area. I think it shows 393 over capacity, if I'm reading it right. With the same thing with including portables.
You're referring to the June 29th board workshop?
Right.
Yeah. What we've done since that time is we have taken a peek at the fourth day enrollment for 2011, just to kind of do a quick orientation. And what we've done is we've converted the June 29th precise numbers. It was 393, I think you said, or 293. And we've converted those into ranges now that we've seen the enrollment, the actual on-the-ground enrollment for 2011. We thought it was smarter to use a range rather than precise numbers that really can't be that precise. So you'll see that if you were to reference back to that June 29th workshop, you'll see that in every case, every middle
So
school.
you are using current enrollment,
No, only as a reference point. We have not done a new 5-year projection ahead using 2011 data.
But that's quite a bit of difference between the two.
Yeah, and well, all I can say is that we felt a range was a better planning tool than a precise number that was not really precise.
But 393 is not even in the range of the 150 to 250.
How would you trust any of the numbers?
Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, also, we use the resident projections and have seen those updated. So that was part of the filter that we were looking at the numbers with for our updates.
Right, we've used the 2011 resident numbers as well. So we do have, we do have more recent data than our baseline 2010 planning data, and we're attempting to respect that in these ranges. But what we can't do is we can't lay the 2010 5-year projection over the 2011 5-year projection, which we can do hopefully in the near future.
Speaking of 5 years out, you apparently have the projection of the number of 1-year-olds and 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds and so forth in the area now to work with, don't you, with that data for your 5-year planning?
We will, yes. Yeah.
You don't yet, but you will, right?
Well, I'm not sure if we actually have it in hand or not. Peggy, you may know, but
Every year we get the birth rates for the local area, and that informs some of the projections, in particular the 5-year projections, because that gives us 5 years ahead who's coming into kindergarten. So we look at those numbers. I think the other thing that we're reacting to is we know that our enrollment projections, we've got an additional demographer who's helping us look at those numbers. We really do know that this is the first year of the new student assignment plan, so it's very tricky, and which variables we're supposed to roll into our modeling so that we do projections. We're not sure which ones are going to be the best long-term, so we're having outside lenses look at that. So we are always going to be, the numbers that we give you now are today's best numbers that we have. But we're not satisfied with that, and that's why we're asking extra demographers, extra community people to come in, look at those models again, look at the projections, and see if there's ways that we can tighten up those numbers, make those projections much more accurate.
And I believe for construction-wise, that's why we're only going a year out to 2012 and looking at only opening Van Assel and Boren and planning for portables for 2012. Once we have better projections, we have the October 2011 projections, then we can look at planning for the next year, and we'll be renewing those plans every year. Middle schools. For the Eckstein, Whitman, Hamilton service areas, as you can see, the shortfall is a pretty wide range, 400 to 700 students. And depending on our more current projections that we'll get for October 2011, that would decide whether which option we'll look at further. For instance, if the shortfall is in the smaller range, 400, we could seat those students at Lincoln. But if the shortfall goes to the 700 shortfall, we may look at opening John Marshall or Wilson Pacific. High schools, if we look at the projected enrollment in 2015, it's 13,790 students. Current capacity, 15,463. You see the difference? We're actually doing pretty good. It's 1,673. So we're looking pretty good with our high schools. It's a matter of where the seats are. We have Rainier Beach underutilized right now. But we're looking at program enhancements to actually encourage some student growth at Rainier Beach. And I'm going to hand this slide to Doug.
I think this is the last slide. This is a look at a number of events that need to take place before the first year of the plan can be implemented. We're holding community meetings this week and next. We actually had a board workshop last evening. Some of you may have been there. The Planning Advisory Committee that Peggy mentioned will get its first look at this plan after its formation next week, and so it'll be on the 18th. The board requested last night that we work in at least one other meeting with that advisory committee, and I suspect it will be more than one between now and November. The Advanced Learning Task Force will get a good look and start to work on the plan, I think largely with regard to APP location this fall. And then the board's operations committee will get a refinement of this work for their October 20th meeting. And then there'll be some adjustments made based on your comments, your input, other community meeting input, the board, and any advisory committee inputs, all in an attempt to make this plan workable for all. And then hopefully an introduction to the board on November 2nd of the first year of the plan. And I would expect that what we would be looking for there is guidance from the board on whether we can proceed with the first year of this look ahead. Probably an audit and finance committee meeting on November 10th to look at the methodology for funding, and then or perhaps a board action on November 16th. The first year of implementation then would begin in December, which would begin getting architects and engineers engaged to do any design work necessary to reopen schools. And then we'll have new data in hand this fall. We'll be able to get another 5-year projection and get more accurate so that some of these ranges that somebody was just asking about here can be tightened up so that we aren't dealing with such a wide range. Admittedly, these are ranges, and I'm sure frustrating for some of us, but that is the data we have, and I think as we move forward that will become more refined. Is that in fact the last slide, Chris? Yeah, okay. So why don't we turn the lights on and so we can see each other.
So, more comment cards, please. Now, just to note that this is an ongoing process. The capacity at seattleschools.org, every day we read those, we collect, we consider, we include them in our planning process. So this does not end when we leave. Plus, you'll be able to see the PowerPoint presentation if you go to Capacity at Seattle Schools and then click on the link. That'll take you to our capital projects and planning page. So it shows all the materials that you have, but including the PowerPoint.
Before we get into the questions, I'd like to acknowledge that Director Mayer has arrived.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Chris, could you go back to just one of those middle school service areas? I picked up a couple of things I wanted to clarify for the crowd. Okay, it doesn't matter which one. That's fine. Now, I think I can do it without the lights. I wanted to just make it clear that when this chart shows a portable, or shows 2 portables, let's say, that means 2 classrooms. Some portables are doubles, and some are even quads. So I want to make sure that that was clear. But I also wanted to make sure that it was clear that when we say a shortfall at the top of a slide, 50 to 100, that's a 4-year shortfall. In other words, over that 4-year span, we would expect that area to have 50 to 100 more students than schools have capacity for. Have I mixed the words up? Okay. Oh, okay. Good point. Thank you, Chris. And one further clarification is that when we say 50 to 100 student shortfall or capacity shortfall, that's after schools have been optimized. So if there's an underutilized school in that zone, this assumes that school has been brought up to 95 or 100% utilization. And I guess the last thing I would mention before we go into the Q&A is that you'll notice that some of these service areas don't show anything about opening schools. That may be because there isn't demand for it, but it may also be that there aren't any schools to open in that area. And so if you look closely at your maps in the daylight, you'll be able to see where we have schools that are either closed or leased, and they're not evenly spread throughout the district.
So Doug's going to read these questions, and if you need to clarify the question he's reading that you wrote, just let us know and we'll do that, okay? Hopefully we can get through most. We may not get through all, but you will have a one-on-one opportunity after the question-answer period to come up and talk to us.
Okay, so I'm going to read the question, and I will normally turn to somebody on our staff with expertise in that area to try and field the question. This one is, in the Washington service area, why no portable options? Is it A, the sites won't support portables, or B, not enough shortfall to need portables? Chris, is that you?
There's not enough shortfall to need portables. We can accommodate all the growth in balancing underutilized schools in the Washington service area.
Second question, and these questions I think are attempting to be grouped by subject area. This one says, how many portables are too many portables? Without expanding common facilities such as lunchroom, bathrooms, libraries, and resources. Well, I think that part of the answer to the question is in the question. The things we would look for in putting portables on a site is whether, one of the things we would look at is whether those core facilities for a school get overstressed by adding portables. Is the lunchroom too small? Are the toilet rooms too limited? Or is the gymnasium overstressed and things like that? In addition to some of the obvious limitations on site size and so forth. Follow up.
Yeah, I mean, I've been pretty active in the capacity planning for the last year and a half or so. I've been pretty active in the capacity planning for the last year or so. I represent Lafayette. And we have been very frustrated. It doesn't appear that the building services and sort of the true usage of the building is actually taken into consideration when looking at capacity. You mentioned how big is the gym. Well, we're well over 120 kids that can fit into our gym now. So we are into our cafeteria. So we have 3 lunches. But more importantly, when we have large plays or whatever, we can't have the whole school in that. And so the PTA has to pay double to have anybody come. So I hear you say that you consider that, but it doesn't. As a parent and as a PTA person, it doesn't feel like there is a lot of consideration into truly how the kids migrate through those hallways when you have 120 extra kids in your school. And I would also echo probably even more so even like at a Schmitz Park. Frankly, I think it's 10 times worse there than Lafayette, and I don't even know if they have enough bathrooms there or not.
So what I'm hearing you say is that in the past, the placement of portables haven't necessarily been sensitive to that issue of overcrowding of core facilities.
Right, and I mean at Lafayette we only have 2, so but we've lost 3 rooms that we use for counselors, for tutoring, and other types of programs that help enrich, whether it's tutoring, what have you. We have a pretty large special ed program too. So we've actually lost all those rooms. And for example, special ed now has to be out in the hallways sometimes. Mm-hmm. And so while you may see a room that could become a classroom, in actuality, you just displaced the core program in the school. And now what do we do with that? So, I don't know I don't know just how much you go into the school and really talk to the principals to find out what they have to give up to give you back a classroom to squeeze in those extra kids. I mean, I just don't know that.
And I don't have the history that Lucy does in the district, but I did watch some portables be placed earlier this year and kind of watched the process, and it seemed like there was a fair amount of on-site investigation, although that doesn't necessarily mean that it did not result in a portable being placed on a site and stressing the infrastructure on that site. That could have happened.
I'm sorry, I have to add to that, because we're connected from Lafayette as well.
Uh-huh.
And with kindergarten going to a full day, that also displaced a lot of classrooms. Now, instead of sharing facilities, kids are now needing the facility for the whole day. And at our school, there are 2 kindergarten classrooms that were built as kindergarten classrooms. And then there are 4 kindergartens. And our children are among the ones in a classroom that was made for desk learning. And I'm surprised, we are families that moved to West Seattle for the schooling, and then to come to find out that there's this huge inequity in the kindergarten facilities and in the setup. And I've talked with other people on capacity in terms of, what else has been displaced and what's been moved. Our special education room is functioning in an indoor play space. It was designed to play indoors, and the kids share a wall with the gym. And our school is the largest school, and you've glossed over the fact that it's over 120% at capacity. And the service area is huge. Is there any consideration made for working Pathfinder into that population and absorbing some of that?
Chris, do you recall on that?
Well, West Seattle has the largest growth forecasted over the next 4 years, up to 1,270 kids.
Can you hear Chris?
Can you hear me? So we know that West Seattle is a very critical point in the district. Between Denny and Madison, we know there's a huge problem, and it's right now. It's in front of us right now. So we are here to show you that says, what we see as the biggest thing we can do right now is open boring. And then through boundary adjustments and program changes, start siphoning elementary school kids into boring. And there's a whole bunch of dominoes here that will fall when we can start filling boring. And if that spike truly holds true of up to 1,200, 1,300 kids, then, following on in 2013-14 would, be another school to open, probably Hughes, but, that's not locked in, but that's the one that gives us the most bang for the district's buck, the largest capacity, least disruptive to open, at least for the Seattle schools. And so, and that again would boundary changes, geozone changes, program impact. So it's a balanced approach to try to add needed. I hear you, and we're listening. And what we're saying is the fastest thing we can do is open boring next year. Is that? I don't know if that resolves your specific issue at Lafayette, or.
I'm just concerned about the facilities, the maintenance of the facilities. The school was built before there was ever a vision of technology and computer space. We live in a rainy climate. We don't have an indoor play space now. Our kids have to wait outside in the rain or go crowding into the cafeteria that can't even hold them. It can't even hold all the kids. And I love the neighborhood. I love the PTA. I chose this school. It's a great community. But, putting money into the facilities that attract students makes sense. We all want to consume public education in this neighborhood. So it makes sense to put the money into the structures within the neighborhood because we want to be there. we love public education and we want this for our children. And it feels like, almost like a standoff, like pushing us back and saying, we are going to put as many portables there and see how long it takes you to really get mad. And I mean, honestly, it's like we are just doing everything we can. Our PTA pays for so many things already. And, we can't build a school. If we could, we probably would. I mean, we might get it done quickly.
I can assure you that we share many of your sentiments. We are not fans of portables either. We are sometimes forced to consider them. But I'm an architect by background, and I have a lot of empathy for your needs. I've designed a lot of schools. Believe me, architects don't like portables any more than parents do. Unfortunately, many school districts, not just Seattle, have to use them during rapid growth periods. And we were doing some discussing today in one of our meetings about the history of portables in the Seattle School District. And some of the people who go way back in our group remember back in the program called BEX 1 and BEX 2. And there was actually a portable replacement program there that I think eliminated 75 or 80 portables, probably as a result of meetings like this where people made their feelings known. And that's commendable. I hope we can get to that point again in the near future through other funding mechanisms, other levies. And I think nothing would please us more, or the board more, or you more, than if we could do that. So we certainly hope we can achieve that. I'd like to go back to the cards if you don't mind, and then go to hands so that we can keep this structured. This next card says open Boren. Let's see, 2012-2013. Open Boren as an interim school to serve portions of the Madison-Denny area. Does this mean open Boren for the 2012-2013 school year, or during 2012-2013? To be used starting 13 and 14. If it's for the 12-13 school year, how would that possibly work? Lucy, do you want to take that one?
Our intention is to open Bowen for the 2012 school year. And we will be going to the school board November 2nd and 16th. If we get the green light and go ahead, we'd start design the next day. So it's a tight schedule, but the intention is to open in 2012.
And how would that, what does that mean? Boundary or?
There's boundaries, there's staff.
Which students are going to go there?
Yeah, could you elaborate a little bit more about how that would work then? I mean, who's going to go to the school?
Peggy, I'm going to give that question to you.
Okay, so whenever we open an interim site, it really is a program that goes to that interim site or another school. And there's a couple ways that we can do that. Obviously, we could change a lot of boundaries and make it a neighborhood school. And then that means we're adjusting everything, and there's sort of that domino effect and fallout. One of the things the school board has said to us is there another way for you to think about that? Do we really want to think about an option school there that we would open up? So it would be an option school located for a while at Boren while we get another placement. That way we don't have to change all of the boundaries. Everybody gets to stay in their neighborhood schools and continues with that. But then we draw off those students to Boren. The issue for us there is, will people go? Because it's a voluntary transfer. It may be that then everybody says to us, no, I don't want to go to that option school yet. I'll wait for Boren to turn into a permanent site, and then I may consider sending my kids there. So those are the things that we're having to weigh as we're trying to make recommendations, because we don't want to add another portable to Lafayette or to Schmitz Park in order to keep the boundaries the same so you all can have predictability in where you live, where your neighborhood school is. So that's some of the struggles that we're having.
And that's going to be decided before November 2nd.
We have to just decide that whether we're opening the building or not which program necessarily is going in there, because we just need to start the architect design.
So when would that be decided?
That's part of the discussions that our teaching and learning side of the house, we've started having those discussions with them. What is the program that is the most, drives the most interest? Is it a language immersion program? Is it another type of program that people would really be excited about to come to that particular school?
But Pathfinder's an option school, is that being utilized to capacity?
I'm assuming that one of the,
It is.
yeah, it is.
I remember 30 on the wait list, so. Before that, the decision of whether it will be an option school or change boundaries, when will that decision be made?
So Mike, from the school board perspective, there's 3 steps. The November step, which they're identifying, is the step of actually deciding what physical capacity to bring on stream. So that's step number 1. The second decision would have to be attendance area school or option school. And if step 2 resulted in attendance area school, then step 3 is redraw the boundaries. All of that would have to be done before open enrollment. So basically this all happens presumably between now and I'm guessing the end of January.
That was my question, Richard. Can I have a quick follow-up? I think most parents would have no faith that if it's an option school, that in a matter of months, the school board would
Start over.
I think that most parents would not have the faith that in a matter of months, the school board would be able to get it together to put together an option school with a draw program. I think there'd sort of be a wait and see kind of attitude. I personally would not have the faith that you're going to get the staff together and decide on the type of program that it would be. I think if the interest really is to help with capacity, that the school board should make it an attendance school. I mean, if that's what it is, and that's going to piss off a lot of people too, because you're talking about redrawing boundaries again, and that I think a lot of us pulled our hair out a couple years ago when that all happened. But I guess it wasn't so much a follow-up question, but a comment.
But it worked.
Well, and on that too, I mean, I recognize that the district does not have a lot of money right now to build a new school, to renovate, and spend $11 million on Fairmont Park. So I recognize that Bourne is what we have today. I'm just a little concerned. I heard you mention Hughes as a possibility, and it's a beautiful school, and I love my West Side friends there, but they won't be too happy. But I don't hear anybody talking about what's a permanent solution for a school up in the north end of West Seattle. There seems to be a lot of facilities south end of West Seattle, but there seems to be. Well, that's what I'm asking. So, what is there a plan to consider a more central or a north end elementary school? I mean, all we have, I think, is Genesee and Fairmont Park. Both need a lot of work. So
Why don't we go through the cards? And I'm guessing we're going to hit most of these questions. If not, we'll circle back and catch that.
On the card, actually.
Okay, we'll get to your card, I'm sure. And if nobody asks about Genesee Hill, I know we can speak about it. These cards are primarily Bourne questions, so let's see if we are covering most of them. I think this one may have been addressed. If Bourne is opened, how will the district decide which students will attend there? A. B. What will parents' options be if we do not want our students to attend? And C. When will we know when and if we are assigned to Bourne? Has that been addressed just recently here? Okay. Another Bourne question, kind of, how can Hughes and Bourne add 1,200 seats at the elementary level? Chris, I think that's got your name on it.
Well,
Bourne has been used as an elementary. We've used Bourne as a swing space in the past during construction and other things. So we've had elementary schools cycle through Bourne successfully. It does have it's a large school. It's got a capacity of over 1,000. We wouldn't want to do that. But Hughes has a capacity of 300. So between Bourne and Hughes, we would have enough physical capacity for up to 1,300 additional kids, and I don't believe we're going to get that level of growth before we get to BEX 4. Understand, this is all aimed at bridging us from the situation we're in today to what we can bring online as a result of the BEX 4 levy.
Okay, here's a nice short one I think we can deal with. When does Boren lose its occupancy permit because of non-use? You can just yell the answer out, Lucy.
Fall of 2012.
Fall of 2012. Boren is such a rundown school. How can it be used in its current condition?
We did have a feasibility study done on it. I can't tell you specifics, but we do have an architect online, and we'll be making program enhancements and whatever needs we do that we need to open the school.
Stay with me here. What will happen to Fairmount Park and Genesee Hill schools? And these closed schools are within the Madison boundaries.
No decision really has been made on them yet. We did look at those schools possibly as an interim or a bridge, and both would need substantial alterations. I believe Fairmount Park was closed in 2007 and Genesee Hill in 2009, and would need significantly more improvements. And when you say more improvements, that means there's a longer window for design, there's a longer window for construction, and it costs more money. So with that, for next year, the quickest thing we can do is either add portables or open boring. That's our only choice for 2012. And one of the earlier plans did have a number of portables being added to the West Seattle area, and it was a decision not to do that, and just to open boring. And as the projections come in, we'll look and see if we need to open Hughes.
Lucy, has the occupancy permits been lost at Genesee and Fairmount Park?
Yes, it's been over 2 years.
So, just real quick, from my understanding, I realize the occupancy permit will actually change things for Genesee Hill, but Bourne was in worse condition than Genesee Hill. The maintenance backlog in Bourne was a little bit worse. If I remember the numbers, there was ratings on how many dollars it would take to get Bourne functional again. Is that inaccurate?
I don't know, Chris, do you think that's a correct interpretation?
If you look at the facilities condition index, that a lot of the dollars that it would take to bring that school, up to Boren, up to to bring the facilities condition index up, because of the size of the school, the dollar value is a lot larger because it's 4 times bigger than Fairmount Park. So if it costs $20 million to bring Fairmount Park up, then if you look at the facilities condition index, it tells you that, gee, I need $50 million at Bourne. Well, if everything was equal, you'd actually say, oh, I need $80 million, because it's 4 times the size, 4 times the quantity of stuff you have to bring up. Bourne is in pretty good condition from a facility standpoint, and we do have an architect that's done a feasibility on bringing it up to current, wired data net, the things that we have to bring it to an open school. Just a quick aside, what we don't want to do is preclude some BEX 4 options. We really hope we don't have to pour $11, $15 million into a school that is the wrong size for our future. You know, a 220 student, 250 student school on a small site, when, you know, in Bex 4, we're looking at wanting, you know, 3 elementary and 2 elementary schools here in West Seattle. And now you've spent all this money and it's gone.
Okay, we're just down to the last couple of cards on Bourne and Hughes. This one is, Peggy, you might want to take this one. Hughes is leased by a school that spent lots of money and time to upgrade. How can this district justify removing the lease?
I will take that one. It is one of the concerns that we have as a district. Whenever we lease property and we want to be a good neighbor to everybody, we want to make sure that we are honoring commitments. We do realize that Hughes has been upgraded by the Northwest School, and they did so with the belief that they were staying there for a long period of time. And so that's another one of the issues that we're struggling with right now, because we want to be able to, and as I look at this, they are still our kids. They are still our kids. So how do we honor that? How do we meet the needs of Seattle Public Schools also, because we're mandated to serve our public education kids. And so we're working through that. As a matter of fact, I have a meeting on Monday to talk more about that. How can we resolve those issues? How do we make sure that we're honest and transparent about that? It is one of our concerns.
Thank you, Peggy. The element, I think I heard this verbalized here a minute ago. The 2 elementary options in West Seattle, parentheses Bourne and Hughes, are in the south end. What about relieving the north end of West Seattle? I know there isn't an elementary school immediately available. So what's the 5-year solution for the north end of West Seattle? Is that equivalent to the Madison service area? Is that what we're talking about? Who wants to take that? Lucy, do you want to?
For Bex 4, we would be looking at opening schools both in the Denny and Madison service area. I think further analysis needs to be done in the facilities master plan and in the Bex 4 planning. But we would definitely be addressing the Madison service area.
Okay, there's a couple of more boring questions here, but they appear to be similar to other questions. So if we have time, we can come back to those, or we can do it one-on-one after the main Q&A here. But I'd like to move on to this group of cards. And what is the topic here, Dan? Okay, these are primarily enrollment questions. Let's see if they work. How do you reflect capacity utilization of Pathfinder and other choice schools? This is capacity. Okay. Well, I think in general the way this is treated in our planning model is that we assume that choice schools are occupied 100%. In other words, by manipulating geozones, that they are essentially fully utilized. Is that correct, Chris?
And is that true? Yes. Okay. Well, 100%? No. I mean, nothing's ever 100%. In general, yeah.
But you just said other schools are at 110%. So,
correct.
You've got a different standard for those right now, is what you're saying.
It's not a standard. It's, I think, for planning
purposes. Assumption.
Yeah, different assumption. Yes, correct. For planning assumption purposes, we feel that's a reasonable assumption, since we can more carefully modulate the utilization of an option school than we can of an attendance area school.
One of the questions that came up last night was how come we are putting portables at some of our option schools? And again, because there was such demand for it, and the principal and the program decided that yes, they wanted to do that. We try to support that also. So there is sort of a balance on how we manage those numbers for popular programs.
Are portables considered in excess of 100%? Like if you have an extra portable, does that make you 110%?
No. You might recall these the colored maps we had up here. the utilization of those schools was calculated using the portables as part of the square footage. So if the portable wasn't there, all the utilization numbers would be higher. Okay. The next card here says, does information on the website include the detailed enrollment projections and listing of current portables and room to place portables on the Seattle school site? I don't know about the detailed enrollment projections. Tingu, you may know. The listing of current portables and room to place portables is not currently on the website. I think we had a request at the other community meeting for that as well. So it is a public document. That's online? Okay. Online is a spreadsheet that shows the number of portables currently located on school sites. What is not included on there...
What is online is this. Our enrollment projections is online.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay. Let me start over again. The enrollment projection assumptions are on site in the form that will look like this. The listing of current portables is not on site, but we do have that database and we can make it available.
It'll be on the capacity planning website?
Is that where it would be, Tingu, under capacity planning?
Under the June school board work session website. Oh, yeah.
Is what on the capacity management site? Portables is not there.
But when it is,
we will figure out where to put it and have that information of where it is on the site. It'll either be there or it'll be in the board work session. We'll let you know on that capacity management site where it is.
That was my question. Was it, so you're going to have a link on site, or is it just going to show up at a work session? I wasn't sure.
No, link. The underlying file will be posted at the Seattle website.
Thank you.
Okay, we're approaching the 8 o'clock mark, so I'm going to move as quickly as I can through here, and then we'll convert to one-on-one. What is best practice or typical benchmark for utilization? Using 100% seems optimistic. I think best practice really is that if a school is at 95% of utilization, that's considered optimized. And so if the capacity of a school is 500 and whatever 95% of 500 is really a very good target range. That gives the school some flexibility for program, a little bit of room for growth, and obviously hitting 100% utilization is essentially impossible given the moving in and moving out of students. What elementary school in Seattle Public Schools is largest enrollment? Boren seems high. Not quite sure what that one means. Oh, okay. Again, I think if we can refer you to the website, let me have that, Chris, for a second. To this chart, you'll see the enrollment of all the elementary schools in the district, and that may be helpful in answering your question.
My question was really, what are you willing to accept as the size of an elementary school? Because 1,200 kids is not an elementary school in most cases. So.
Oh, with regard to Boren in particular?
Nothing would be 1,200, so there's no 1,200. There is no 1,200 at a single site. So the 1,200 is between two sites. That's
right. So what's the biggest elementary school in the district?
So 350 FQs if necessary.
I'm just asking what the biggest enrollment is in the district. What's your biggest elementary school?
Well, we'll look that up as we talk here.
But you could co-house two elementaries there like is being done in the north end of the district.
In fact, Lucy, did you say that Boren had two elementary schools in earlier times?
Pathfinder and Cooper.
Okay. And did that equate to 700 or 800 kids, roughly?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Okay, here's one related to data. When was the 2010 enrollment data used to project future enrollment? In other words, is the question, when were those projections made?
Correct.
Those projections were made, I believe, in the spring of this year, April and May. Peggy, is that about right?
Yes.
I mean, March or April. Part 2 of this question is, where did the projections of new residents/building permits come from, specifically occupancy of new residences? And I'm not, if I understand this question correctly, I'm not sure that current projections have embedded in them a projection of new building permits or residents in new buildings. I don't believe that's part of the current data set. Someone may prove me wrong on that, but I don't think so.
Like, for example, people buying homes with children that are not yet in elementary school.
Right, I don't believe that's part of the projection. That would be more something that we would eventually start to integrate into the planning model in talking with city and county planning departments who have a good feel for what projects are in the pipeline and what the student generation might be out of those projects. And I think that will come out of the planning advisory committee that Peggy's just now forming.
And one of the things that I did was last week I met with city planners and I asked that exact same question. If you're putting up these units, can you project whether those are full families, single families, if they're apartments that are efficiencies? We pretty much can guess you're not going to have a whole lot of family in there. And to their dismay, they say it's not part of their permitting process, and they do not have that information, but it's something that they're going to be asking for in the future because it will help their planning.
Well, I mean, for example, we moved to West Seattle in 2010. We have 3 children that are not, one is in kindergarten and all the other ones are younger than that. So, and on my street alone, there are several neighbors that are the same exact situation. They don't even have school-age children yet. So I'm wondering if that's part of any projection.
We're over schedule now, but we want to honor the 20-minute time period for the one-on-one, and I'm hoping that we can do that now. Does anyone have one critical, important thing they'd like everyone to hear? Okay.
Why was this meeting scheduled during the planning meetings for the other elementary schools?
Well, I'll take that responsibility. I made the arrangements for the community meetings back in late August, before we knew when the open houses would be. And if I had to go back, I would have checked with every elementary school. As it turned out, the other 2 community meetings, there was only one elementary school conflict among the other regions. So this was the perfect storm. Not an excuse. Learned a lesson here, but I'll take the responsibility.
You knew in August when the dates were? Because we only found out about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago.
Well, we have calendars. We have everyone that needs to be at the meetings, arrange the meetings, find the location that we want for the meetings. And so, I'm trying to combine all of that together and pick the right spot, plus the availability of the library on certain nights. It's unbelievable how I had to switch around a couple of meetings, and ironically, this is what happened. So the next time, it'll be different. But we can't, October is such a busy month, and I apologize.
Okay, Peggy, how would you like us to move forward from here?
Well, at this point, I know that there are people who still have additional questions. We want to make sure that we can answer that. So the staff are here to stay and make sure that we answer questions. I also want to say that anybody who didn't get their questions answered, how are we handling that?
Capacity at seattleschools.org. That's ongoing. We read them, we collect them, we include them in the process. The advisory committee will see everything. All of us, the community, will continue to give input. This is just the first step in our process.
Now, Tom, my understanding is that we are going to be trying to generate a frequently asked questions component to the website. So one of the values of getting these cards is that even though we may not have gotten to your card tonight, we have hard copy and we can work it into the frequently asked questions group. And by being able to study these in detail, I think that will be a good process.
And the sheets that we gave you that allows you to comment on each of the service areas, that really is work that we are formulating, and we'll be using this next week. So you may have more comments later that you want to give us, but anything that you can leave with us now would be very helpful. And in particular, hearing discussions about Lafayette and portables and what we're dealing with, all of those issues, if we can capture that, that would be very helpful. So with that, I want to thank you all very much for attending, very much for asking the questions, very much holding us accountable for making the best plan that we can. We cannot do it without you.